Imagine walking into a house where every door leads to a mystery, where the walls whisper secrets no one dares to hear, and hidden rooms hold discoveries so terrifying people can't explain them. Tonight, we're stepping inside not one, but three of the most haunted mansions in America, and what we found inside might haunt you forever. Are you ready to enter the unknown? If you love exploring the unknown and discovering the scariest secrets, make sure to hit that subscribe button and join me on every haunted adventure. I remember the first time I walked up to the Winchester Mystery House. Even from outside, the mansion looked like it had grown up in every possible direction, all crooked and strange, as if it had no plan at all. I had heard stories about the place for years, about its endless rooms, staircases that led nowhere, and doors that opened into walls. But seeing it in person, it was nothing like I imagined. It was bigger, creepier, and more confusing than any picture could ever show. The air around it felt heavy, almost like it was pressing down on me as I climbed the front steps. As I stepped inside, the smell hit me first, a mix of old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic like blood, though I knew it was probably just the years of decay. The foyer was enormous, and the walls were covered with old dark wood panels. Every corner I turned, every hallway I walked down felt like I was stepping into someone else's private world, frozen in time. But it was the silence that got to me the most. Not just quiet, like someone had sucked the air out, but a tense, expectant silence. I could hear my own heartbeat loud enough to feel in my throat. The house had a strange rhythm. Stairs went up but didn't reach a ceiling. Doors opened to walls, and rooms split off into more rooms. I remember stepping into one hallway, and the floorboards groaned under my weight. Something about the way the house was built didn't make sense. It felt like a maze designed to confuse anyone who dared to walk inside. It was easy to imagine Sarah Winchester walking these same halls for years, adding more rooms, never finishing anything, driven by the voices she claimed haunted her. At one point, I stumbled across a spiral staircase that led straight into the ceiling. I stepped carefully, my curiosity winning over the nagging voice in my head telling me to run, and climbed it, expecting some secret view or hidden room. When I reached the top, I found only more floorboards and a low, slanted ceiling. I laughed nervously at myself, but it was hollow. There was a feeling in the air, like the house was watching me. I moved to another room, this one darker with faded wallpaper and a small broken window. I ran my fingers along the dusty surfaces and found old furniture still covered in white sheets. A sudden creak made me jump, and I swear I saw a shadow move across the far corner. My brain wanted to explain it. Maybe it was the wind, maybe the light, but my chest tightened. My imagination was not helping. It felt like something was there, just out of sight, waiting to notice me. Then I came across a hidden door, one partially hidden behind a curtain. It looked like it hadn't been opened in decades. I hesitated for a moment, listening, but heard nothing. Taking a deep breath, I turned the handle and pushed it open. The room was tiny, a crawl space of sorts, with bare wooden walls and a single chair in the corner. Dust motes floated in the sunlight streaming through a small crack in the window. My heart was racing as I stepped inside, the air thick and musty. I couldn't shake the feeling that someone, or something, was watching me. Every instinct screamed to leave, but I couldn't stop looking. On the wall there were scratch marks, deep and old, as if someone had tried to claw their way out or warn me. The thought made my stomach twist. Who could have been in here, and why was it left like this? I left the room and continued exploring, trying to calm myself. But the house had its own plan. A door I swore was on the left moments ago was now on the right. Hallways twisted back on themselves. Every room seemed to tell a story of obsession, sorrow, and madness. I imagined Sarah walking endlessly through these halls, haunted by the voices of people she believed would curse her family if she didn't keep building. I felt a strange connection to her fear. The idea that you could spend your life running from something invisible, something that whispers constantly, guiding your every move. By the time I exited the house, the sun had dipped lower, casting long shadows across the grounds. I remember pausing at the steps, looking back at the impossibly large structure, and feeling a shiver. It wasn't just the history that made the mansion frightening, it was the presence, the idea that the house itself remembered every secret, every step, every whisper, and would never let it go. I left with more questions than answers, with my heart still hammering and a strange sense that the house was alive in its own way, waiting for the next person curious or foolish enough to walk its endless corridors. Two-story Villisca Axe Murder House, Iowa. I had been driving through Iowa on a quiet summer evening when I finally saw it, the Villisca Axe Murder House. From the outside, it looked like an ordinary two-story home, old and slightly worn, but there was something about it that made my skin crawl. Even as I parked my car and walked up the creaky front steps, I felt a chill, like the house was watching me, waiting for me to cross the threshold. I had read about the tragic story before, the night in 1912 when 8 people were brutally murdered here, but standing in front of it, hearing the wind whistle through the trees, I realized that history had a way of lingering, almost like it had taken root in the walls themselves. As I opened the front door, the smell hit me immediately. It was a mix of old wood, mothballs, and something faintly metallic that I could not place. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts suspended in sunlight. I stepped carefully onto the wooden floors, each creak of the boards echoing like a warning. I kept telling myself it was just an old house, but my heart refused to listen. Every shadow seemed to stretch too far. Every corner seemed darker than it should be. I felt the weight of the past pressing down on me, the silent whispers of those who had died here almost tangible. As I opened the front door, the smell hit me immediately. It was a mix of old wood, mothballs, and something faintly metallic that I could not place. Dust floated in the air like tiny ghosts suspended in sunlight. I stepped carefully onto the wooden floors, each creak of the boards echoing like a warning. I kept telling myself it was just an old house, but my heart refused to listen. Every shadow seemed to stretch too far. Every corner seemed darker than it should be. I felt the weight of the past pressing down on me, the silent whispers of those who had died here almost tangible. I started in the living room, where the family must have gathered before the tragedy. The furniture was mostly gone, but old stains on the floor hinted at meals once shared, laughter once heard, and then abruptly silenced. I traced my fingers along the windowsill, imagining the little girls, Ina and Lena, playing here. The thought made my stomach twist. The air felt heavier, charged with sorrow, and I almost felt their presence watching me, curious and sorrowful at the same time. I moved to the staircase, slowly climbing to the second floor. Each step groaned, complaining under my weight. The hallway stretched ahead, lined with doors that led to bedrooms where the murders had taken place. I imagined that night, the sounds of the axe striking, the panic, the confusion. My chest tightened as I opened the first door. It was empty, save for the faint outline of what must have once been a bed. Dust motes shimmered in the fading sunlight, and I thought I saw a shadow move at the edge of my vision. I spun around, heart pounding, but there was nothing. The house was playing tricks, I told myself, but deep down, I knew it wasn't just my imagination. The most chilling part was the children's room. The room was tiny, with 2 beds that had long since rotted away. I could almost hear their laughter, then the silence that followed. I knelt down, brushing my hand over the floor, and my fingers came across something hard, an old piece of wood, splintered and sharp. My mind flashed to that night in 1912, imagining the fear those children must have felt. I swallowed hard and backed away, the hair on the back of my neck standing on end. I wandered through the house, exploring each room carefully, and every corner seemed to tell a story. There was a room in the back, smaller than the others, that had been used as an attic storage space. Dust covered. At one point, I sat on the creaky staircase to catch my breath, trying to calm my racing heart. And that's when I heard it. A faint whisper, almost a sigh, coming from the hallway below. My pulse jumped, my hands trembling. I called out, "Hello?" My voice sounded foolish in the heavy silence. Nothing answered, yet I couldn't shake the feeling that I was not alone. The house had its secrets, and for a moment, I felt as if it was letting me in just a little, showing me its sorrow, its rage, its grief. I left the children's room and slowly made my way back to the front entrance. Every step felt heavier, as though the house was reluctant to let me go. I glanced back once at the windows, at the worn wooden frames, at the house that had held so much tragedy. I could almost see shadows moving inside, figures frozen in their last moments, still replaying the horror of that night. My chest ached with a strange empathy, and I felt an unexplainable connection to the lives lost here, to the silence that had settled in the house for over a century. When I finally stepped outside, the air felt lighter, almost normal again. I looked back at the house, and despite the sun setting behind it, casting long, eerie shadows, I couldn't help but shiver. Velisca wasn't just a house, it was a witness, a keeper of stories too dark to forget. And as I walked to my car, I knew that I would never forget the feeling of that silence, the weight of the past, and the whispers that seemed to follow me long after I had left. 3-story Franklin Castle, Cleveland, Ohio. I had driven through the quiet streets of Cleveland on a late autumn evening when I first saw Franklin Castle. Even from a distance, it looked like it had grown out of the earth wrong, tall, dark, and looming over the neighboring houses like it owned the block. The last rays of the sun hit its pointed towers and narrow windows, casting shadows that seemed alive. I parked my car and walked up the cracked stone path, feeling the wind pick up around me. The air was crisp, but there was something heavier too, as if the house itself exhaled a cold breath that chilled me to the bone. Stepping inside was like crossing a threshold into another world. The air smelled of old wood, dust, and something faintly metallic that I couldn't identify. My shoes creaked on the floorboards, and the sound echoed through the hallways, answering me in a language I didn't understand. I tried to calm my racing heart, telling myself it was just an old house, but every shadow felt too deep, every corner too quiet. I felt like the house was alive, watching me, judging my presence. I moved from room to room, my curiosity battling the uneasy feeling in my chest. The mansion was filled with antiques, remnants of a family that had once lived here, but had left behind so much more than just furniture. I ran my hand across a dusty banister, and a shiver ran down my spine. There were photographs on the walls, black and white faces staring straight at me. Some looked stern, some sorrowful, and some almost angry. I imagined the stories they could tell, the secrets they had witnessed, and a tight knot formed in my stomach. I reached the staircase leading to the second floor, and each step seemed to groan under my weight, like it had been complaining for a century. Upstairs, I found a long hallway lined with doors, many of which were locked or boarded up. I pressed my ear against one door and heard nothing, just silence. But it wasn't peaceful. It felt thick, almost oppressive, like the air had weight. I imagined the children who had lived here, the laughter that once filled these halls, and then the tragedies that had been whispered about for decades. Franklin Castle had a reputation for being haunted, and standing there, I understood why. In one of the rooms, I discovered a hidden nook behind a heavy curtain. The space was tiny, barely enough for one person to sit. I crouched inside, my flashlight barely illuminating the dusty walls. There were marks on the floor, scratches deep into the wood, as if someone had tried to leave in a hurry, or someone had tried to warn me. I swallowed hard, feeling the pulse in my neck. For a moment, I thought I saw a shadow move across the room, but when I blinked, it was gone. My imagination? Maybe. Or maybe Franklin Castle had decided I was the next observer of its secrets. I explored further, moving into the dining room, where the long table was still set with tarnished silverware and cracked china. The air felt heavier here, almost suffocating. I sat down on one of the chairs, and for a brief moment I could almost picture the family gathered around, speaking in low tones. And then the wind howled through a broken window, rattling the glass, and I jumped, my heart slamming against my ribs. It felt like the house itself had taken offense at my intrusion. The most unsettling part was the basement. The stairs leading down were narrow and steep, and the smell of damp earth hit me as I descended. The shadows here were longer, darker, and I felt my own presence multiply in the dim light. There were old trunks stacked against the walls, and I brushed off a thick layer of dust to reveal journals, papers, and strange artifacts left behind. I flipped open a journal, reading scrawled notes from someone who had lived here long ago. Words about sorrow, fear, and unexplainable noises filled the pages. It was as if the house had collected all the human emotion it had witnessed and stored it in every corner, waiting for someone like me to feel it. When I finally climbed out of the basement and back into the sunlight, I paused on the front steps, taking a deep breath. Franklin Castle wasn't just a building, it was a keeper of history, of secrets, and of sorrow. Every room, every creaking floorboard, every shadowed corner held a memory, a whisper, or a warning. I felt my chest tighten once more, knowing that even though I was leaving, the house would remain, silent and watching, waiting for the next curious soul to enter and feel what I had felt. Driving away, I glanced back at the dark silhouette against the evening sky. The sun had fully set now, but the mansion seemed darker than ever, its towers like fingers pointing accusingly at the world. I couldn't shake the feeling that Franklin Castle had marked me in some way, a permanent reminder that some places never forget. And for the rest of that night, every time the wind rattled my windows, I imagined the shadows of those old halls reaching out, reminding me that some stories refuse to stay buried.